Man's argument, again, it has strength and it has negativity to it too. Role models, absolutely. No one argues the point. But if you want someone like you and they provide that benefit, what's wrong with that? How many of you ladies want a female gynecologist? What's wrong with that? People like you. The second argument against compensation. It's too difficult to identify the harmed parties and determine how well off they'd be if not for the harm. Well, that's true too, because we're generations away from physical slavery. But it doesn't mean that the repercussions of slavery hasn't continued throughout the generations. His argument is, well, which ones really have suffered? Well, we don't know how to really quantify that. I don't know how to quantify that. This is the problem with the utilitarian argument. What's the calculus? There's a general suffering, but I didn't do anything. Well, I got news for you. You don't have to be an active participant to be responsible. Do I have parents in here? Do you know where your child is at night?
Yeah, I do know.
Yeah, you bet you do, because there's a responsibility. Neighbor comes over with the softball. Your kid just launched this right through my window. Who do you think's paying for it? If you don't want to get into a certain kind of match with your neighbor. Of course we're responsible. There's a general sense of responsibility. I was at a meeting one time, a large meeting in Atlanta. It's about 10,000 of us, and it was kind of what we call a reconciliation meeting between the races. And you know, we won the Mexican-American War. They kept the land, by the way. It is called California. In fact, if you're in Texas and you go 200 miles up to the Mexican border and you buy land, the titles are still in Spanish. So we won the battle, and they kept the land. And so we're having this reconciliation meeting, and someone from the Hispanic Mexican background told the Caucasian people there, he says, you know, we understand war and people win, people lose, and you know, we suffered under you, you know, after we lost, you know, there were certain pejorative words, negative words, you know. I don't want to mention them, but you know, if you were Mexican, there were certain pejorative. And he says, you know, okay, we should let bygones be bygones. And there was a, you know, the same kind of thing with the Caucasian, you know, forgive us this, but in the end, the Hispanic guy said, for taking our lands. And there was a Native American guy standing behind him, and he says, well, whose land do you think it was before you took it from us? And the Hispanic guy had never thought of that, because it had been their land for so long. And he immediately turned around and he apologized. See, we do owe each other something, people. To try and make right wrongs that occurred in the past. You can't erase it. When I was in Europe and Germany, the young Germans were tired of hearing about the Nazis. We're not anti-Semitic. We didn't do what they did. We're tired of it. Yeah, and you're also inheritors of your culture. We all are. So while we can't necessarily identify who was most hurt or who did the most damage, see, we are in community, people. Somewhere in this, we have to accept joint responsibility. We don't beat each other over the head. Yeah, and look, by the way, someone who is really oppressed might excel and do better than anybody else that came out of that group. I'm thinking of someone like Oprah, who was a street, I think I mentioned this on Tuesday, she's a street reporter, and she's worth $3 billion. She's built her own empire, self-made person. But that doesn't happen real often. So the affirmative argument when it comes to compensation is, look, let's try and balance the field. How do we do that? We open the window large enough for inclusion. You still have to qualify. If you don't qualify, I mean, how many of you want a pilot that doesn't know how to land an airplane? So we understand the compensation argument there too. It has its legs, it's got an upside, it's very valid, but it also has a downside as well. Ooh, it's much easier if I have a PowerPoint, but. Okay, so here are three more. Argument for compensation from those who innocently benefited from past injustices. Innocent beneficiaries, of injustices do not know anything to the victims of those injustices. Well, we go back to the discussion we just had. Of course we do. People who come later in society do benefit. And people who occurred earlier miss those benefits. The way we try and compensate, again, through affirmative action, we try and open the door to the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. The diversity argument. Diversity is not valuable enough to trump the importance of competence. And this is where the real rock and the hard place come together. If you're super qualified, like Cheryl Hopwood was, and she's turned down because there is a quota to include within this range of acceptability, that rubs you the wrong way. That's a meritocratic argument. I worked hard, I'm at the top of my class, I deserve to be rewarded for my effort. Yes, you do. And if that university doesn't have room for you, are any of you applying yet to the four-year schools? Don't apply to one. I don't care how qualified you are. You can be extremely qualified and not get in because of this window of opportunity that the court has said is allowed to exist as long as it's inclusive and not exclusive. So the fact that you're not allowed in doesn't mean you're excluded. It means that the parameters of inclusion have been set, and as long as they are inclusive according to the law, they're allowed to have them. So you multiply your chances by multiplying your applications. So diversity works. Equal rights results argument. Unequal results are not necessarily indicative of inequalities in opportunity. That's correct. Just because you didn't excel doesn't mean you weren't given opportunity. You can be given all the opportunity in the world and still fail. My defective twin brother, the one with the 135 IQ, after one semester at school, his GPA was 0.00000. He chose to drink 3.2 beer and play pinochle all day, never went to class. Guess what? In that instance, you're a failure. He gets out, he does 4 years in the Air Force, he comes back, his father-in-law gets him into Chase Manhattan, and when he's done in Chase Manhattan, do you remember the Y2K problem with computers? The whole world was going to collapse? My brother was in charge of fixing that for Chase Manhattan Bank worldwide. This is a guy who flunked out of college with a 0.000 GPA. You can be a failure here and excel over there. You can excel over here and fail over here. You were not around when we went to the moon. To go to the moon, we had to take pictures of the moon to figure out where we were going to land. Sea of Tranquility. What was the guy's name? Ron something came to the county jail. I was a senior counselor in a jail alcohol program. Ron Garlock comes to jail. Older guy, probably his late 50s. I said, "What have you done with your life anyway?" He says, "I invented the gravity camera that took pictures of the moon. The closer it got, the faster the pictures were before it crashed into the moon. And that's how we figured out where we were going to land." And he invented that. I said, "What are you doing in jail?" He says, "I'm a drunk." He says, "My last episode, I married a millionairess and I drank up all her money." I mean, how sexual can you have to be to invent a camera that lets us go to the moon? Or at least, hopefully we went to the moon. And then you end up in the jail as a drunk. So, inequalities and successes, look, they're real. Many people who don't have equalities or access do not become successful. Most who do, more on the successful side. But there is a cross to that, and that's what Postman is trying to relate to us. One more, people. Affirmative action requires discrimination against a different group. So this is Cheryl Hopwood's argument. The only problem with me is I'm white. I didn't ask to be white. Well, you didn't. You're right. But you are. Just like people of other ethnicities don't ask to be that ethnicity. And they are. Once again, affirmative action's only plan is to try and enlarge the window of opportunity. And then make a statement that is inclusive rather than exclusive. So, the fact that it discriminates, of course it does. What if the quota at the school, we never talk about this, what if the quota, let's say for African Americans is 17%, and you're in the 18th percentile, and you don't get in either? I thought this was supposed to work on my benefit. I have a 3.65. Yeah, I know, but we already have all the people we need to fit the parameters of the mission statement, the quota. Is that fair? Well, it is if you accept that the rules of social engagement are the mission statement and they have certain parameters of inclusion. And if you're outside those parameters, it doesn't matter what your ethnicity is. learn to learn to live with it. That's the way life goes. So yeah, it does in a way, it creates reverse discrimination at times, but that's the way the system is set up, not to harm you, but if you don't fit in, the system doesn't owe you to fit in. The last argument, of course, is the principle of merit. Important positions should be filled by those who are best qualified, such as policy is maximally efficient and treats people as ends rather than merely means. If you work hard for it, the expectation, and this is consistent throughout society, if you work hard for it, you ought to be rewarded for your effort. Isn't that why you work hard? You work at a job, you work at school, whatever it is. I mean, things you don't think about, like raising children. How many of you know it's work? You got to work your butt off, and you put your life on hold for at least 20 years. You don't get to do the things you can do when you were single or just, a couple. Of course it does. And at the end, you hope that the reward matches the effort that's required. Same thing when it comes to sports, academia, learning a vocation. You work hard for it, you should be rewarded for your effort. That's the whole point of libertarianism. I can do whatever I want, I can succeed at whatever I want as long as I don't interfere with your opportunity to succeed as well. I meet the level of success, there should be a reward for it. And that butts right up against affirmative action. Well, I worked hard for it and I was excluded. Yeah, get used to it, people. The reason we open this Pandora's box is because this is what life really looks like. And this is a way of trying to balance the level playing field. If you're on the top end, it's unfair. If you're on the low end, it's very beneficial. And all we're trying to do, because it's never going to be perfect, is we try and make it a little fairer, a little fairer, a little fairer. It's the whole point of utilitarianism, the greatest happiness for the greatest number. I asked you at the beginning of the semester, how many of you want less rather than more? Everybody wants more. Well, then we open the window for more. But it doesn't mean everybody gets more. And not at the same time. Maybe Epicurus is right. Maybe you have to suffer a little bit before you get your reward. Maybe no pain, no gain. I don't know how that works out, people. It's all individual. All of that said, any questions for me? Now, there's more to the notes. Let me warn you. I could easily put you to sleep right now, and I don't want to do that. I think I've had your attention. This is the critique of all the things I've shared with you. Notice it is quite lengthy, but notice also that it's highlighted in colors. Before you take your quiz, I would just suggest you sit down and review it. Review the PowerPoint I put up, review this, review this. This is your last chance to get 100%, people, and to try and get your grade up to where you've deserved to having put all the effort in this semester. Okay? Any questions at all? I want to chat with you just for a minute before we're done. It's something personal, not class. Is there no questions for me? Okay, if you came in late, let me know you're here. I'll see you Tuesday, please.